The Dallas Cowboys have lost their third straight game, falling to the Atlanta Falcons. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Dallas Cowboys fall to the Falcons on Sunday in Week 9, 27-21. And I feel like this is a little bit of my fault because we did a show a few weeks ago after the Cowboys beat the Steelers and said, I don't care if the Cowboys lose the rest of the game. It was worth it to win this game in Pittsburgh. I didn't mean that the Cowboys were actually going to lose every game moving forward, but it seems like that's where we're at now with 3 straight losses. Big takeaways coming out of the game.
Well, the big takeaway is that this could be a pretty short show because clearly I think we found the reason that we've lost all those games. Thank you very much, Marcus.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
I'll wear it.
Listen, I think honestly watching this game was pretty familiar for Cowboys fans at this point, right? Like we've talked about it all week that the defense was just understaffed at this point. I think that's the best way to put it. They don't have their regulars. The temps aren't working very well. And some of the folks that are the regulars that aren't hurt just aren't very good players. Yeah. And you know they're just being overmatched on the defensive side of the ball in several different ways. They did get some good news on the injury front that after a week of thinking that Trayvon Diggs wasn't going to play, but you got him playing and you got Kalen Carson. But for the most part, despite really actually beating the expectations that you and I had established all week, right? Like keeping Atlanta to under 31 points. The offense very much did not keep up their end of the deal. So we're going to get into all of that here.
Honestly, that was my biggest takeaways. This is a very winnable game for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
If you would have told me going into this game the Cowboys wouldn't allow more than 7 points in any quarter, we would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. And
Absolutely.
The Cowboys got a takeaway. Was it multiple takeaways? They got one takeaway. They got a big sack, actually 2 big sacks by Carl Lawson. I thought for the most part. Yeah, the most part, the defense held up their end of the bargain. I know 27 points is not ideal, and I know Kirk Cousins averaging 9.3 yards an attempt is not great, but considering the circumstances here, I didn't think it was that bad. But it's the same things that continue to plague this team over and over. Penalties in key moments of the game, not being able to convert in short yardage. First drive of the game, actually, the Cowboys get a stop on defense. Great. They move the ball up and down the field on the first drive, and then they have to settle for a field goal, right? Like that was your chance to put your stamp on this game. Coming out of halftime, Mike McCarthy, they're doing an interview with Pam Oliver, and he's saying, we need to stay ahead of the chains. And as that interview is playing, Landon, Terrence Steele commits a false start on the first play. Like it's unbelievable how this team just can't get out of their own way. And that doesn't even mention the drops, the missed blocks. Zach Martin missed a block at a screen that probably would have went for a touchdown. It's so frustrating to watch this team continue to trip over their own feet again and again and again.
Well, I mean, let's put a name to it. I mean, I think the problem we saw glaring in this game specifically, it feels like, was coaching, right? The 2 things that you really want to see kind of get ironed out in just like a communication level was play calling. And we can have a whole conversation about some of the crazy stuff that this team was doing on 4th down, including a fake punt that on their side of the ball at a point of the game where they just absolutely didn't need to be doing that. A 4th and 1 where they were executing a jet sweep when they were running the ball at almost 6+ yards a carry, I think, at that point in the game. Just going away in general from a successful run game. I think, and then you talked about the penalties, you talked about execution, right? Like the Cowboys had 7 pre-snap penalties, including an absolutely inexcusable too many men on the field penalty on that 4th and 1, on another 4th and 1 that forced them to punt the ball on a really key drive. So yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've talked about it, previously with the issues with the coaching and schematic and just being kind of, static and having problems. And then obviously we have, that's been like something that's just been overreaching for the last few games. We pointed out the different areas the Cowboys have had problems on offense, but today it really felt like specifically that the Cowboys seemed like a disorganized mess. And they couldn't stop getting out of their own way. They found ways to move the ball at different points, but they couldn't, again, like we talked about, keep it up with any kind of consistency because they didn't seem to be on the same page. They couldn't protect Dak Prescott at key moments. Dak wasn't getting rid of the ball when he needed to because he felt like he was having to overachieve. More hero ball from him. It just felt like a very familiar refrain with maybe just an even more heavy effect of the coaching staff on the outcome of the negative outcome of the game.
And I want to say, I thought this team played hard from the start to finish. It's not a question of effort or anything like that. I think if you were wondering if Mike McCarthy lost the locker room, that's not my takeaway from this game at all, just to be clear. They're just not that well coached on both sides of the ball. Like, you cannot be making some of the mistakes that they made. And unfortunately, it's a lot of veteran players making these mistakes. Like, I think you can live with penalties and mistakes if it's young players, right? And they do have a lot of young guys playing.
They do.
But to have veterans making these big time mistakes, that's when it's really frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, look, a guy is a young guy and he's made entirely too many mistakes. Agreed. But you can't have that plus the veterans that are going out there and like Ferguson and Steele that are, making these, again, holding or the offensive defensive pass interference. Those are judgment calls. Those are things that happen on these plays all the time. Not lining up correctly, so you got an illegal formation. Not knowing the packages so that you were on the field when you weren't supposed to, so there's too many men on the field and a key down. Not knowing the snap count or coming off the ball too early so that there's an illegal motion.
Like, not knowing you should be on the field or not, like in Dalvin Cook's situation.
That's exactly. Like, I just, like, that's inexcusable. Like, and certainly, obviously, that's on the players to some degree, but communication also falls back on the coaches. And it'd be one thing if it was a one-off situation, but it continually is happening. And to me, that kind of continuous issues of a lack of communication, a lack of organization, that falls on the person that's organizing and in charge of communication. So it was just a really bad showing from the coaching staff. And I agree. It's not like the team is like McCarthy's lost the team. It's a weird situation where the coach is just not doing a very good job, and I feel like the team was fighting all the way to the end. They were in this ball game, but they couldn't overcome their own ineptitude at points.
Let's talk about the offense, because as bad as the defense has been this season, I think the offense has been far more disappointing. Let's talk about that unit next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get action on sports in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Later, let's talk about the Cowboys offense because
please, let's not.
Once again, it was one of those games where you felt like you needed your offense to click and play well. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, they started the game off okay. They first drive, 7 plays, 59 yards. They went punt, turnover on downs, touchdown. And again, the score was 10-14 going into halftime, in good shape. You get the ball back. Here's their next 5 drives. 4 plays, 8 yards, turnover on downs. 4 plays, 16 yards, turnover or punt. 9 plays, 22 yards, and a 58-yard field goal by Brandon Aubrey. 5 plays, 11 yards. 6 plays, 25 yards. 5 drives in a row in the second half, 3 total points, and that's the game.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at the drive summary for this game, I couldn't believe that they had turned the ball over on downs 4 times on this game, right? And honestly, it felt like this. It was a weird and this is just like the most Cowboys thing. It was a weird combination of penalties and then ineptitude at points, killing these drives. But it feels like the difference between this Cowboys team and previous Cowboys teams is that the previous Cowboys teams, not always, it feels like it's faded at times, but they found ways to get out of those situations. And the Cowboys this year don't seem to be able to get out of their own way. Like they shoot themselves in the foot, and then they aren't able to necessarily always create the big play or convert. It's not like they necessarily were terrible on third downs or it's just, or exceptionally terrible in the red zone. I think they ended up somewhere like 60% or something in the red zone. But the problem was that they couldn't necessarily get there because something weird would happen and disrail the drives. And really, I think one of the big things that going back and watching the game and watching the flow of how the game was going while they had the ball, the difference between and we pointed this out over and over again. The difference between this team when they go in up tempo versus when they are in just regular tempo is enormous. Like I think that was part of the reason they kind of they had success early in this game, right? Was because they were using some more of that up tempo that was clearly something they were trying to work on at different points this week in practice, and they used it at different points in the game with a lot of success. And I think at sometimes it had the effect of taking them away from a very successful run game. So yeah, I think they have something with up tempo, but what they've struggled to do is to just operate the offense just at a normal pace, and get out of bad situations and stop, kind of failing themselves with bad execution with pre-snap penalties or with, like I said, drops or just bad execution, unable to properly get the play done. So it's just been very frustrating to watch them this year because we've seen them be bad at penalties before, but we haven't seen them, previously to this, failed to get up off the mat and convert the third down despite it being 3rd and 12 like they had in previous seasons.
Yeah, you talked about the big plays. At this time last year, they had 50 big plays, which is 10-yard runs or 20-yard receptions. This year, they have 39. Now, if you remember last year, their offense was not great the first half of the season, and it really picked up in the second half of last year. The Cowboys offense is way behind the mark that they were at this time last year. I believe Dallas is 31st in the NFL in big plays. I think the only team that's behind them are the Panthers. Tells you kind of where we're at on offense. Like, they struggle so badly to create big plays, and unless it's CeeDee Lamb, nobody else is making them.
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit more of Ferguson early on, which was great. I even commented on it. It was nice to see him get a ball, break some tackles, and make some big plays, a couple different plays in a row, I think early on that drive, if I'm not mistaken. And I felt like that really Atlanta kind of clamped down on that after that first drive. They must have saw something in the defense and kind of try to plug that hole. And then, listen, we don't have a ton of time because there's so much to talk about. I do think it's important that we talk about the run game in general. And I felt like the Cowboys really did find something with Rico, right? Like, we obviously, haven't really spoken about the fact that what all went down before the game with Zeke and being,
let's talk about Rico.
Yeah. So, but like, as he, he wasn't able to get to the game. Rico got a ton of the touches, obviously, because that must have been part of the conversation with Zeke, was that Rico was clearly going to be a kind of more of the bell cow. They clearly focused on him getting touches, and he paid off big time. He averaged, I think, somewhere, I don't have the number right in front of me, but he averaged somewhere in the area of 5 yards a carry. And the Cowboys offense, really, thrived at times running the football against Atlanta's defense. So, I think that was kind of, really tearing my brain apart with the offense, because I felt like they were good in the quick game at some stuff, but I really felt like it was taking the Cowboys away from running the football, which was something I felt like they were doing really, really well.
In the last 3 games, Rico Dowdle, because again, he did not play the San Francisco game. Last 3 games, Dowdle's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. Like, they have an NFL running back. But why they've chosen to go away from him as frequently as they have against Detroit, 5 carries. In this game, 12 carries, and most of them came in the first 2 drives of the game. And then for whatever reason, Dalvin Cook started to get some work. Hunter Lipke got a carry, which is fine. He converted on his carry. I don't know why he hasn't been more effective. And he's been a good outlet receiver. I mean, he's averaging 8 yards of reception on the season. I thought in this game, he did a good job of catching a lot of passes at the line of scrimmage and turning them into 5, 6, 7 yard gains, which is exactly what you need your outlet receiver to do. It feels very much to me like the Cowboys have a capable starting running back, but for whatever reason, maybe it's injuries, maybe it's his conditioning because he was sick last week, they just feel very hesitant to give him the lion's share of the work.
I mean, you and I talk about this a lot. Like, there's not yards per average, yards per attempt. There's a lot of different things that can go into evaluating a running back success. But one of the numbers that we both agree in a lot in is success rate, right? And right now, in this game, Rico had a 58% success rate.
He's top 15 in the NFL in success rate among running backs.
And that's like, and that kind of just shows you, like, this guy needs more opportunities, and that's why it was like laughable to kind of talk about Dalvin Cook, and he came out and did fine too. He had a 50% success rate today. He had a good day as well. But the point being that all this stuff with Zeke and Dalvin Cook, like, Dowdle's the guy that we need, and we need to find ways to get him more touches in the future, because and this isn't even just about Dowdle. I want to talk about the offensive line and the fact that they're having more success as an offensive line blocking in the run game, because I think that that's one of the few positive things that happened in this game that can actually go on past these few games and into next season, because it's good to see these guys sort of congeal a little bit more in the run game, and the Cowboys to find some sort of success there, because they really have needed it desperately.
Yeah, I mean, I think the run game looked better this week. They had 137 yards rushing, 6.5 yards per carry. I don't know why they went away from it so quickly. And I understand there were a couple times where they got behind the chains and it was harder to run, but even when this game was 21-10, you didn't need to completely abandon the run game either, So I feel like at this point of the season, you might as well keep working on it. Cooper Beebe and Tyler Guyton need to work on it anyways. Tyler Smith and Terrence Steele can certainly help. You might as well use the rest of the season to work on the run game. Might as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I mean, I think it's going to keep you in ball games better. I mean, that's part of the reasons a lot of these games have gotten so far out of hand, is that you keep giving up the ball. You keep giving the ball back to the other team's offense. If you can find a way to possess the ball a little bit, then even if you're kind of limping a little bit in the passing game, the run game can at least kind of kill some time for your defense a little bit, or at least make your offense a little bit more viable by, adding the threat of play action into it. If you're willing to use that, but still it helps with the pass game as well. It helps with everything.
We're going to talk about Dak Prescott's injury in this last segment, but just really quickly, I want to talk about him as a quarterback in this game. 18 of 24, 133 yards, 5.5 yards per attempt, had a touchdown, did run for 30 yards. The completion percentage was good. The ball placement was kind of all over the place. Like Jake Ferguson had to bail him out on a screen pass where the ball was thrown way over his head. I thought Dak was playing hard. Like he was clearly fighting in this game. There was the touchdown play. I mean, all 5 pass rushers recorded a pressure on that play. Again, Dak just did not have. Again, the stats were good. I just don't think he played a very good game.
I mean, again, I think we do this and people focus on this because we say Dak Prescott's name, but I think it points to the larger issue, right? Where everybody is kind of taking their turn, sharing responsibility for problems, right? And Dax was taking the sack when, instead of just throwing the ball away in that second sack, it's just, there's certain things that you see during the game where, and I get it, Dak's like trying to play a little bit of hero ball. He's trying to overcome what's going on. But you're right. There were times when he's missing easy throws to the flat.
He missed Jalen Tolbert on that long play that he ended up taking a sack on,
Or they're making the completion, which is great. But if he had put the ball on the guy, like just with normal accuracy, with his normal accuracy, he catches the ball and he gets a couple more yards instead of diving or making a one-handed catch to try to even, complete the reception. So I just feels like there's a lot. I mean, I hate to use this phrase again, but there's a lot of meat left on the bone at times in the passing game because Dak is inaccurate for reasons that I don't really understand. Like when he's normally very accurate in those same situations.
All right, let's have a big picture talk about the Dallas Cowboys now that they are 3-5 after 8 games and their starting quarterback could be out a while. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and so much more. All of Hillsdale College's our courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with reading, quizzes, discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can go bet on this Cowboy-Eagle game in Week 10. Cowboys were 2.5-point underdogs. Now they're 6.5-point underdogs for reasons that we'll explain here in a little bit. But just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, Lana, let's talk big picture because this team is 3-5. They are pretty far down in the NFC standings right now, and it's very likely that they're going to be without their quarterback for the foreseeable future. Where do the Cowboys go from here?
Yeah, that's the big question, and what are the consequences immediately? I think for right now, it's they're playing the Eagles next week. We're going to see who's even playing, but I think right now they have to kind of just continue to try to win these ball games. But if I'm the Cowboys, I'm very seriously considering putting in place protocols to kind of make sure that my players are protected long term as a priority to rushing them back to play, right?
Yeah.
Like if we don't know what's going on with Dak Prescott, if his hamstring, he says he felt something he's never felt before. Apparently, in the post game, he hurt himself throwing the ball, which is not a great sign necessarily, right?
I saw a video of him walking after the game, and I mean, usually the way these injuries are, you end up feeling worse the next day. Just by the video of him walking, we're not going to see him for a long time.
So I think that at this point, you're being cautious with that because there's not you look at the situation currently and there's not anything that's indicating to you that you should be rushing Dak Prescott back to this season.
No.
So I think you've got to protect him. I think you start also considering guys like Deron Bland even more, and guys like Micah Parsons, right? Like, not that you shut them down for the season or anything, but more like you consider their timelines and you raise their threshold for returning to play, right? To make sure that they're not, not so much not re-aggravating themselves, but not causing new injuries, trying to compensate for, their current injuries, because you have to start thinking about avoiding the disaster of, well, we can't lose any more players for like season-long injuries that start eating into next season, because we're not tanking yet. But I think you start to consider 2025 a lot more than you had in these previous weeks as the year goes on, and it starts to look like a situation where, you're in a bad spot to try to even make the playoffs, much less win the division. And we haven't even started playing division games yet. So things can certainly turn around, but it's going to be tough.
Just to show how bad the Cowboys are in right now. If the Cowboys would have lost that game in Pittsburgh, let's say the Jalen Tolbert conversion doesn't work, I believe according to Tankathon, the Cowboys would be drafting at 2 or 3 right now. Just to show you where they're at the rest of the league. They're currently 13th in the NFC right now out of 16 teams. And you start to look at the playoff picture, Washington already has 7 wins. Philadelphia is 6-2. Yeah. Everybody in the NFC West has 4 wins. So everybody in that entire division has 1 more win than you. The NFC North looks really deep once again. The odds of you making a postseason or run to the postseason are pretty low. And then when you look at the schedule coming up, like, they are going to be heavy underdogs in their next 3 games. You start to look towards, like, let's make sure that Micah Parsons is 100% before we rush him back on the field. Let's make sure that Deron Bland's foot is ready to go so he doesn't have to have a second surgery that's going to put him out 9 months now and not have him ready for 2025. And you start really focusing on the development of young players. I mean, you were already doing that. But at that point, like, Dalvin Cook probably doesn't need any more touches. Or like, you can probably, I don't know if you need to continue to play the safeties of Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson as much as you're playing them. Maybe Eric Kendricks takes a back seat, and maybe you just let DeMarvion Overshown, who I thought played well for the most part in this game, be a full-time player.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think Wanya Thomas also left the game with potentially a concussion. We need to check on that. Yeah. But I thought he was playing a little bit more. I noticed him. But yeah, I agree. There's no reason to kind of hold back on still continuing to let young players play, even when Bland comes back eventually. Letting Carson getting some reps, so Bland kind of slow rolls his way back in, and Carson himself getting some opportunities. That's a good thing. Maybe you even consider things like giving Zach Martin more opportunities, to kind of take a breather, and then giving someone like DJ Bass more opportunities to get into the game and play a little bit. So, I think that there is, and there is opportunities here for that sort of thing, just to kind of not necessarily, soft tank, but opportunities to get young players that, need the opportunity to play. It could be part of this team this year, later on in the season, and in the future. There's a class of guys that aren't quite rookies that are good enough to get into games. But McQuamu was the guy that got into the game a lot more than normal, right? That level of player who is ready. It's time to go ahead and let those guys get some opportunities now, because some of these folks, it's just got a little bit stale.
And the last thing, you and I don't believe that they're going to fire Mike McCarthy in season. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Do you still believe that?
I don't believe that they will. No, I mean, I think it's whether they should or not is another question. But
do you think they should?
I think that they probably should, but I don't think that I trust my team to do this, because my real big concern is that I don't want a situation where Al Harris, no offense to Al Harris or any
you don't want the Jason Garrett situation to play out, or the Antonio Pierce, what we're seeing with Las Vegas.
People suggesting that some of the reason that we should fire Mike McCarthy is to give one of those guys an audition chance. That's great for them, but I don't want them auditioning for my team, because that's not what I'm looking for in my next head coach.
Yeah.
I think you just let Mike kind of go down with this ship through the rest of the season, and let things play out organically. That's probably the best way to land this thing, where people don't get hurt and people don't get the process is done properly. I feel like in that way.
Because we have complaints about Mike McCarthy as a head coach, but I think one of the things that you and I both agree on is, like, he is a professional NFL head coach. Like, he knows how to run practice. For the most part, he knows how to get guys ready to play on game day. He knows the routine. I mean, they've got the stretch coming up in November that they always have, where they play 3 games in 12 days or whatever it is. Like, he knows how to operate that.
I just don't want him calling plays. That's the problem. Is that, like, if you had strong coordinators, it'd be a different story. But
would you let Scott Tolzien call plays for a little bit?
But that's no. I don't like another Band-Aid situation where he's ultimately calling the plays. No, I think it's time. Like, honestly, that's the issue, is that I don't know that he's capable of stepping aside the way you needed him to.
I just want them to have organizational clarity when it comes to the end of the season. Like, hey, we're cleaning house of the coaching staff. None of this. We kind of like Al Harris. So whatever guy that we bring in has to make sure that Al Harris is on the defensive staff. Like, I don't want any of that. Like, have a whole new slate, new coaching staff where they pick the guys they want here. I don't want anything that's going to make it any more muddy than it already is.
I agree. And even if that risks us putting into Bill Belichick territory, which I'm not looking forward to. I think it needs to be a new coaching staff. Like, it needs to be a new group, not like a hodgepodge of the previous coaching staff.
Well, with the way we're trending, Deion Sanders and Travis Hunter doesn't seem like that bad of a combo anymore, does it, Landon?
Marcus, stop it right now. Stop it.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Make sure you check us out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Landon, you and I will be back on Tuesday. Maybe we're breaking down a big trade that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones made. Probably not, but we'll be here on Tuesday breaking down either a trade or the game. Definitely the game. So make sure you check us out. Download the podcast again wherever you get your podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy your week. We'll see you right back here on Tuesday.